All right, welcome everybody. I'll help you to order. We'll kind of start off just with a couple of minutes. Yeah. What's up? Oh yeah, we can roll call. Thank you.
Eric Talbot.
Here.
Michael Aronson. Here. Phil Maria. Here. Carla Elliott. Here. Angelica, I don't know your last name. Oh, yeah.
Tanganis.
Tanganis.
Tanganis. Here.
Tanganis. Okay. And Sherwood.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, and so Angelica will be eligible to vote tonight. I think we're missing members and an alternate. So, all right, and then as far as the meeting from last week, I just want to make sure. I think that we have four of us here. We do. So we're going to have a motion. I'd like a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Just as a reminder, I think we have the folks that overlapped last month's meeting. This might meeting myself, Michael, Carla, and Phil on the floor, which is a quorum. So we can definitely have a motion from one of those four to approve the minutes from last month's meeting.
Second. Second.
All right, and if it's a roll call, I'll call it just because I know who was here. You got it.
Michael Aronson. Sherwood.
Very good, thanks, guys. All right, so we will jump into agenda. Sorry, I'm just going to pull up my notes, and then all right, so we'll just want to compare the agenda that I have on my computer versus the one I have here, just running more up to date. So that we don't have any new items on the agenda today, so we're going to jump right into continuing business. For the handful to look at today. So the first item on the agenda is Planning Board 18-2023 PAR 21-2023. This is One Bank Portland. It's the project that we've seen I think a couple of meetings ago. Had lots of questions about. And I think maybe it'd be helpful before we kind of get into the anything newer that's changed. Maybe Valerie, give us just a status update with where you are. I know you had a long memo on this application, so I think it should be our starting point.
Yeah, so I'll just start with the procedural. So right now, this particular application is an unlisted action of seeker. It is going to require they provided an EAF part 1, but it will require an EAF part 2, and then ultimately potentially a NAGDAC from this board. It does require a county referral to Westchester County, and it does require site plan approval, subdivision approval, Board of Architectural Review approval, and Zoning Board of Appeals approval. So before any of those referrals and approvals, or actually the referrals start taking place, or our recommendation over to the ZBA, we are still in the midst of really defining the project and identifying what variances are necessary, as well as providing this board enough information so that you feel comfortable either giving some sort of recommendation for this particular project.
Right.
And so I think both Tony and I have comments, but we can talk about those after they present their application.
Okay. So, and I think, so you have presented this to us before. I think there have been some changes, but maybe if you can just give us because we've heard it before, a high level where you are with it. And I would like to talk about some of the points that Valerie has brought up, or in her memo, and Tony as well, just to really understand where this project stands. Why we, Frank went over it.
Okay. Yeah, you want me to bring it up?
Coming from the neighborhood, from neighbors, and you're coming from the board. So that board of thought in the beginning trying to now totally redefine the project and trying to adjust the project and address some of the and some of them like to reduce the number of units by one and relocated the students around so that it's a distribution of landscaping and federal access. Of the existing parking lot that we propose. But the next meeting, we're hoping to have a flat plan from the surveyor. So this was more, it went from having if you recall, this was two buildings with that thing. So we have before, in the parking lot all allocated underneath or to one side of the property. So now what we have done is basically each unit will have the garage and parking outside the garage.
Sorry, Mr. Hernandez, can you check to make sure the microphone is on? James is having trouble hearing. Is the green light on? No. There you go. Yeah, all right. Sorry about that.
So, the work, we make sure that this, we have enough firepower access, we have parking, and we relocated the units again to be, environmental landscape in the middle, into the adjacent neighbor. We did, engineering wise, we were trying to go away entrance to it, away from the intersection. That's basically where, again, due to the number of units, we know that there is a concern with traffic, so we're going to secure a traffic study. And there are other issues, and also there was a aerial view that I thought kind of helps understand a lot. Things are separate. So that was the landscaping. We showed some of the maneuver, provided the layout of the unit, so it can be adjusted. And also the same the renderings that we had shifted them. Those in, I think
I'm looking for the aerial, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a separate first. So I think that there are a few of those pictures. I think they give you a good understanding of the neighborhood, how multi-family is all around it, how close it is to the neighborhood. So that gives you kind of a good understanding of the site, the location of the parking lot, how this area with the cable building or the cable building built there with 84, and even when the change of view came into effect for that, there was the intent at the time for the zoning board was to have portion of the property was kept as residential. And that's
The buildings that you're showing in that aerial, just as we're looking at that, that's on the west side of Highland, not the
This
side. The lot's on the other side.
This is the lot. This is
no,
North Island Avenue,
it's
right?
the same side of that.
Yeah. So wait, this is North Island Avenue here,
Okay,
right?
got you. So
This is
on
the
the
cable
outside of
And this is the lot that we discussed.
Bankroll. I'm sorry.
This is just like upside down, right? This is
Yeah.
coming
There's a
up
little-
in Portland here.
Got it.
And again, there will be comments about traffic, about the unit. There's approximately like 300 dwelling units on the road. It's the full, we only proposing 10 units. I know that, they are. Suggesting a review that shows the apartments to the left, but to the right, parking areas, which will become the development.
These are single family or are they multi-family?
Each building has, we have four, 3, and 3. The 3 buildings are 10 units there. But they're not, well, they're adjacent.
No, but I'm saying, so an individual building has either 3 or 4
Yeah.
units that will be individual property.
Yeah.
That's one.
I think it might be a good time now to just kind of go through the comments that we've got. Valerie, your team.
Okay, so I'll start with the variances.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that we raise is, we're looking for density variance. But this particular zoning district, is based on density 6 dwelling units per acre up to 8 dwelling units if you provide certain amenities to the village. Right now, they're asking for density variance, but they're not proposing any of the amenities. And so I think we're raising that whether that even could be given within this district.
Yes, and looking at this section of the code, it's very clear that the additional density permitted is tied to the applicant providing one of the benefits outlined in the PRD district requirements. And even looking at the bulk table, it's clear that the additional density is dedicated on completing the density bonus requirements. So I don't believe this is a proper use of a variance in this instance. And even looking at the zoning board's purview, they're authorized to issue variances where the application of the zoning code will result in a practical difficulty or an unnecessary hardship, not providing a benefit and trying to skirt that requirement by the zoning board instead isn't necessarily the intent of this section.
Right. And then we're talking about the density in the context of this project. We're talking about a lot that's already small for the district and is being made smaller. So this is a sort of a intrinsic issue with what they're trying to do. It's not something that's intrinsic to the lot.
That's correct. And I think, and we still have the issue of the Route 9 setback. There's specifically requiring from section 270-12G. And again, that, there's technically a 100-foot setback and it depends on where the measurements are being taken from. So that would also potentially be additional variances that are necessary. So I think in terms of actually defining what this project is at this point, because if the density, if the board agrees with the point of view that the density variance cannot be provided, then the applicant really does need to go back to basically a drawing board and identify a site plan that actually meets the densities. And if they are proposing more than 6 dwelling units per acre, then they would have to provide the amenities that are.
Right. And that's all coming on top of the fact that I think it's the 3 acre minimum.
That's correct.
In this zoning district, and we're already well below that.
That's correct. They're proposing, I believe it's like 1 point something acres.
Yeah, 1.3.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it'd be helpful just to hear from board members, based on these kinds of, and this came up in our last meeting, and there were, I think, some very subtle tweaks to the plan, but nothing of the scale that would kind of move our conversation. I mean, so kind of given where the zoning is here, given what we are, and council is advising us are kind of able to do here, I'm concerned that, I don't want to lead, the applicant down a road of an application that we can't approve or that's not appropriate. I just want to have that conversation here. If there's more of a scalpel, or if it's just a different project that we would need to be looking at to fit on this site. I want to open that line of thought up to the board.
I guess I'm sort of curious, is it possible, Taryn, to give us a couple of examples of the types of amenities that a density variance would require?
Yes, looking at the PRD requirements, some of the different incentives, some of the different bonuses, the provision of a portion of publicly accessible river walk, provision of a public park, a public open space, historic preservation, use of green building techniques, brownfield remediation, contribution to non-site related infrastructure improvements, provision of public artwork, and stream bank restoration and stabilization.
Some of those are on site, some of those are off site, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And we can discuss the difference between 7 units and 10 units and the amenities that are discussing.
And it's also worth mentioning as well that the PRD district requires the provision of affordable housing.
How many affordable units are Well, but it's more than 10, it's 10 buildings, but it's,
No, it's 10 units.
oh, 10 units, okay.
Yeah. How many units would make this,
What would be the allowable density? Is it 6 units?
Seven.
7 units would be, okay.
I would still require an area variance
Right.
for the lot area.
I think, I mean, that's kind of, I mean, my kind of looking at this and just kind of overlaying the zoning requirements, right? The zone, you know, what the zoning code prescribes for this lot, right? And it's kind of starting off at a deficit, and just in terms of its size, it's a much smaller lot than what the PRD is looking for. And that's existing, it is what it is. But they're not taking an existing lot and trying to increase the density. They're taking an existing lot, they're cleaving it into 2 lots. And then they're kind of looking for a variance to increase the density. So for me, like, I just, you know, as a board, I want to know that, you know, are we comfortable with allowing that degree of variance from what the zoning code prescribes, and why, if we are, and what else could the applicant be doing on this lot that would be more in keeping with what zoning would allow. That's kind of, I think, before we have, you know, 8 meetings on this project and then we kind of come to that conclusion, I think it's important that clear guidance, you know. Yeah, go for it.
I'll say something. To this, I would agree with what Chair Roy has said, and what I would say specifically is that I think that you're requesting a use that's more intensive of what's actually permitted on the property according to the code. And I think that, you know, to ask for a density bonus without providing a clear and distinct amenity, it's just kind of, you know, sending us to a project that we can't really evaluate in a fair way. The other thing I would say is, I think I'm pro housing, you know, it's a, generally speaking, I think anything we can do is I think there are changes, but it's a business, but that's where we live. But regardless, we need here. And I just think that you have to really consider the neighbors around it. And the fact that you're going from 60% pervious coverage to 85% pervious coverage, I think that's also need to be considered. I think you have to think about ways that you can reduce the pervious coverage so that you get more infiltration. You're either going to hill this, you know, there's sure very area. And I do think that the other thing I would ask is, have you reached out to your state DOT to inquire about the number? So it just keep, you know, like before you put too much into what their is that the issue right now that I understand? Like if they're at the right of way and they have a buffer, they're right of way.
Well, even if you look at the exit of the aerial photos, if you're going to apply the 100-foot run away from the Route 9, first, it doesn't affect the location of the building. We are within the buffer, but I'll be better thinking of that. But
This site is within the buffer.
yeah,
The next that you're proposing are within buffer.
right. So it's the whole.
Right, but this is a new improvement.
Yeah.
Correct. So, okay. So I think that that's just an important thing to suss out.
And I do understand and read the comments from vetting this is before that we'll discuss in the plan that there will be it's either the density as like super acre, or there has to be the indication of the density bonus who had to provide the additional units. That's
Just quickly add a comment before we continue, for the benefit of our friends on Zoom, we have a request to please speak a little bit closer to the microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if other board members kind of have any thoughts on this issue specifically, but it's, I don't know. I think I've been pretty clear in terms of where I see this right now.
Yeah.
And I think I did one just kind of question, maybe this is for council, but in terms of the density bonus, is that a shall, or we have the ability to, or is it something that we would, if they were providing a bonus, if they were providing an amenity, is it something we are then obligated to provide? If this also then falls to the concerns of the neighbors with, just the number of units that are going to be on that kind of difficult corner.
Based on the language in the code, the granting of a bonus is discretionary on your part.
I agree with everything that you and Eric said. Get clarity on those issues. I think you'll go back to. But yeah.
And I don't want to, be, I think that Eric's inquiry about the Route 9 setback is really, really important, right? Because then that's going to physically shape the parameters of the lot and where you're able to make improvements. And so when we're talking about density, all of this in the context of all of these other area variances that this project would require. And so I don't feel like there's any kind of control or clarity in terms of what it is that we're looking at. It looks to me like it's too kind of aggressive and dense, maybe the best, better word, for that lot. And, I think you need to evaluate the project based on to bring it more in line with what the zoning will allow. And that's, again, like I said, you're already, it's already a small lot. You're making a small lot smaller. And,
Right, but the size of the lot, the size of the area, there need to be a B zone, residential zone, you got to put PRDs, and that's, the lot was just more under 3 acres before this number. Like,
understood, but this is subdivision. You're making it smaller. So, yeah.
And just for the board, just so that in the PRD, you can have single family detached, single family attached, two family detached, two family attached, and then you clearly like the townhome concept.
Right.
So there's a number of different housing types that are allowed in that zone.
Right. All of which should be looked at in terms of this. Other kind of feedback from the board, or I don't know, Tony, your main comment was communicated by Valerie, but
Yeah. The big thing for me again is that Route 9A, because there is a map in the package you submitted that actually points to that line and says right of way. And if you take 100 feet off that line, that's almost that whole lot. That was one of the biggest points. there's no stormwater proposed or grading. I couldn't make any comments on that. The other thing is sight lines. I don't know if you want to look at alternate entrances as well, coming around that corner. That might be an issue. I don't know if maybe there's an opportunity to tie it in with the other lot is shared, because you're going to be getting easement of that anyway. But the other one that I just want to note is the section 270-12G, to demonstrate that the building height required minimum separations to apply. It's a calculation. Ground coverage is less than 1,000 feet. You'll have to show that as well. Other points I just want to note, I said sight lines and the open space. I have that as well. And those are the big points. Oh, the other one I just wanted to mention really quick is with your traffic movements, you showed a pumper truck and fire truck. But, these are going to be multi-story units, so you're going to have to get the specifications for the apparatus from the fire department, because that's going to be the bigger truck that's going to move around there, especially with a 2-story building, 2-3-story building. Those are my big points.
And if he's responding to the density questions, maybe those layouts change significantly. It becomes a different project, but then these are still comments, thoughts that you should. All right, I know that there was a lot of, and I'll just kind of note that for the record, there was several letters, emails that were submitted, which I believe are those on the agenda now. But those are now part of the public record. So if anybody who's listening can and should look at those if you're looking at where the community is on this. And we have a motion to reopen the public hearing on this application.
Michael, it's the motion to reopen the public hearing. Finally, be a second the motion.
Any objections? No objections. So I'll just kind of look first in the room. Is there anybody here in the room who's would like to speak to this application this evening? Okay, I do see one hand. So when you come up, you can just I see a couple of hands. So you just come up, yeah, the first hand so with a gray shirt. So you can come on up, just introduce your name, place of residence, and then speak briefly about your comments on the proposal. Sure, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Good evening.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Peter Steed. I live at 7 Murray Lane, so just up the street. I've been representing the village for about 15 years now. You guys maybe from the December meeting, I spoke about this. Quite honestly, we get the same comments, persist with this new application. Really what I would ask is that, much of what Seth was saying here, follow the code, right? There's so many things about this application that aren't being compliant with the code that it's hard to find things that are, right? So the 3 acres, which has already been discussed, the 6 unit per acre density, the setback. One that hasn't been discussed yet is the parking. The existing Cablevision office space is a 13,874 square foot building, according to the records. That would require 46 parking places with a 1 place per 300 square feet. The applicant, for some reason, it's inexplicable to me, came up with a calculation that said there was only 3,372 square feet in that building, selectively picking certain spaces in it to count as currently used, but that got them to their 12 spaces that would be left after taking the upper parking lot away, conveniently enough. So I think the parking is another issue that needs to be addressed that hasn't already been discussed. The only other things that, haven't already been discussed, just the affordable housing law, zoning compliance for the impervious surface, maximum building coverage, maximum density, setback, drive widths, parking, all of those are being requested. Proximity to 9A. The exit and drive has already been discussed. The new location, while probably compliant versus the distance needed from the existing road, or turnoff, is got horrible sight lines. And it's going to be super steep. If you look at the topography of that spot, and I put some ground level photographs and the email I submitted with today, it would probably be a 25 to 30% slope to get in. And I don't know if that creates issues for emergency vehicles also. This will create additional congestion and I fear safety issues with the bad sight lines. Van Cortlandt in the mornings on school days and in the afternoons is a horrible street to drive up and down, and there are a ton of kids on it. So I'm concerned about all of that. Lastly, there were some environmental concerns on the original application in terms of the site is at least in proximity to or was a hazardous waste at some point in time. And I don't know what that waste was or any of its nature, but the fact that construction is going to happen there, airborne particles, school kids in the neighborhood, and then eventually residents there, exposing it to that hazardous waste potentially to groundwater. I don't know if any of that is a problem or not, but I don't think proper diligence is that. So I support using this lot for something, but I do not think a large development like this is the right use. One or two family house on that property would be better, but again, we need to think about what the impairment of the existing parking and all the other variances are. So in the meantime, I would agree with what's been said about this project probably needs to be thought like
Thank you for your comments. Great. And I do, yeah, the other hand up. Right. Thank you. Thank you for signing in. So you can decide either before or after, just,
Same school. I'm resident of Westchester County for 60 years. My friend and I, Chris, are the ones who are the developers trying to develop the project. I just want you to put a face to the corporation that you see. I listened to all your comments and I appreciate your feedback and very well taken. I've been a supportive member of my community for 35 years in Almont. I'm an active member of my church. I was a former board member of Hills. I have been in the contracting business for nearly 35 years. Dad started the business, did a lot of work here in the village. As a matter of fact, the steps that you walk up and the ramp that you use here in this building, I constructed and put the lights up, the signs, the numerous sidewalk projects in the village. I'm very amenable to the ideas that you guys have put forth. We're looking to try to do this project that fits exactly what you are speaking to. We'll go back and discuss it. Other than that, I just want to thank you for your time, just so that you know what we're dealing with and
sure. I will just look up online. I don't see anybody has used the hand raise function on Zoom, but if you are interested in speaking from the community and you're up there, use the hand raise function. Don't see anybody right now. Given that I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Or topic on the motion to adjourn the public hearing.
I may be a second the motion.
Any objections? No objections to the motion. Adjourn. I think that we've completed our discussion here. Can I have a motion to adjourn the agenda items?
Yeah. One more question, JB.
Oh, you can, sure.
JB, would you happen to know the height of the cell phone tower on top of the Cablevision building? Yeah, I just wanted to point out to you, there is a required cell phone tower setback from the property line equal to the greater of the underlying setback for the zoning district or the height of the tower. So you want to make sure that the property line, when the property is subdivided, complies with that setback requirement.
Thank
Just want to point that out.
Thank you. That's it. Can I have a motion to adjourn the application?
Michael Aronson, motion to adjourn the application.
Maria, second.
Any objections? No objections. Motion carries. All right, thank you. All right, so next up on the agenda, item B, Planning Board 11/2023 BAR 09/2023. And this is the Popeyes application. So I think before the applicant speaks really quickly, I know Valerie, there's a little bit of an update in terms of, I believe that this project is still with the ZBA.
Yes, it is. The ZBA is supposed to be having their meeting on Thursday, but but there have been some communications back and forth dealing with the traffic. So we thought it'd be good to have that discussion and then hopefully wrap up everything that for in terms of site plan approval, so that ultimately at next month's meeting, we'll be supposed to the DAR. And I will be able to wrap up.
Okay. Very good.
Okay. Good evening, Clifford Davis, 200 Mamaroneck Avenue, White Plains, New York, on behalf of the Popeyes application. I hope we can wrap it up next week. So we were supposed to be at the ZBA earlier this month, but we got snowed out. So it's been adjourned, and I understand that you probably there were a whole bunch of punch list items, and I think we've tried to address that as much as we can. But tonight with me is our traffic engineer, so it's a great man. He submitted his submission. I didn't see any comments regarding that, but he addressed the site distance and the gap analysis. Hopefully, he addressed any of your concerns, but he is here to address any of those issues. We're still unfortunately waiting for comments from the New York State DOT. I don't know how to light a fire other than any more than we've been trying to do, but we don't yet have that. And we hope that if there's an approval next month, that can be a condition of the. You had requested regarding opening, that we have some sort of management plan, and we're comfortable coordinating with the village police department, and hopefully we can put that as a condition of the approval, that we contact the village police department when we plan open, and we'll read whatever the police department requires, however long it's necessary. Hopefully not too long, but for open ceremony. There are issues as to the bypass lane. Trust me, we've been going over this with our team. We would love to have that bypass lane. It makes sense for our client. It's in a lot of fast foods. It's in a lot of the Popeyes to have the bypass lane. We've submitted all sorts of prior iterations showing that it doesn't work. Collier's engineering raised certain issues, but the issues that they raise are really inconsistent with what Keller Sessions said. So Keller Sessions had raised the issue that our grade couldn't be over 6% in the code. If we follow the alternative that Collars says, the grade would be at 9%. So that doesn't work. Collier says, why not have 7 spaces? The code says you need 8 parking spaces. So we're not looking to have a variance, we're trying to comply with the code. And as far as moving within it, there's a two-way ingress and egress. And according to our engineer, the traffic engineer, the engineers, it's a safer movement. With the alternative, it would be right on top of the retaining wall, and it would be much tighter. So we would love to have that bypass. It's a small property. The building is quite small. So the building that we're proposing for the Popeyes is much smaller than that presently exists. And there's going to be landscaping and all that, as set forth on the site plan. So I think that's the best that we can do, and hoping that you'll agree with me. We submitted the truck maneuver, that works. And we also have submitted, the materials with regarding the materials that would be on the Popeyes and the facades. So we're hoping that there are no issues, and that we could afford sitting at the planning board and also at the DAR to next month after hopefully we get the zoning board approval. So I've given council the easement agreement.
Yes.
So I think that we've met each and every analysis that you guys have asked us for. So we would like to know if there's anything left checklist that needs to be addressed, and we'll address it. But hopefully we're coming to I think in Marietta words. So let me know whatever comments, and if you want to hear I'm hoping this is engineering. They're on. So that's it. Anything engineer to address any issues for Star Kit, our traffic engineer is here to address the traffic issue.
And you also have the village's plan, traffic consultant is also here as well.
And has he had the opportunity to go through the revised comments?
Yes, and Phil,
You're here.
yeah, he's here.
Don't sit here.
Either way, it's okay. It's up to Phil.
It may be useful for Stock to just go through his gap analysis.
Okay.
And site distance, and then I'll address that as well as the site plan.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan.
Good evening, Stark Kip with Freedom Engineering, 2 William Street, White Plains. Licensed professional engineer. As has been hinted at, we did a gap analysis and site distance evaluation coming out of the discussions we had with the board back in December. Without getting too technical in nature, we did conduct the gap analysis along the site's frontage as kind of a back check. We also collected volumes at the same time along the roadway so we could make sure we were getting comparative data to when we also conducted our turning movement analyses. Gap analysis shows that there are sufficient number of gaps for both lefts in and lefts and rights out of the site. This was all based on data provided in the highway capacity manual. It's laid out in our report. We also conducted a site distance evaluation. As expected, there are sufficient sight lines exiting the site driveways, as well as entering the site driveway and for the approaches along Route 9 to the site. So intersection and stopping site distances that are available all meet or exceed the AASHTO recommended site distances. Else. That's a really high level review. I'm happy to discuss it in more detail, but with gap analysis, it is a lot of number.
I think that my only question regarding the gap analysis is just how that varies based on the time of day and
right. So
related with that.
So what we did was we looked at the peak hours of the use. So we had looked at we looked at the weekday midday, weekday PM, and the Saturday midday. These were the study periods that we looked at as part of our original study. We did hone in on the peak hours that we observed on the previous study, so we weren't doing a gap analysis for 4 hours. It's just mainly a kind of a cost-saving measure because it does require a lot of effort to conduct a gap analysis. But like I said, what we did was we collected volumes along the roadway at the same times so that we knew, hey, are traffic volumes higher or are they lower? The concern being if they're lower, then you could be skewing the data and that there could be more gaps when we were doing analysis and we'd be really about comparison. So I think that answers the question of when we conducted the gap analysis. Just during the same peak hours that we had observed that correlate with the proposed use.
And then so it's like a site study that you're on site measure. How's it just maybe just
yeah, so a gap analysis is first you get gap data, and what that essentially is somebody is out there either through manual observations or through AI through video, they will measure the gaps between cars. So in the southbound direction along 9, a car passes the site. How much time passes until the next car goes by? And the idea being that what we're trying to figure out is, are there enough gaps of sufficient length for a person to turn out, in this case, turn right out of the site? There are accepted gaps that are laid out in the highway capacity manual that we use to basically break down and say, all right, how many gaps were above 7.5 seconds? And that's how we know that there's enough gaps for eastbound left turns out of the site driveway. The reason in the memo that we have, there's kind of a difference in headways or gaps that are allowed. You'll see that there's 4, 7, 6. Those differences are the differences in movements. So the right turn out of the site is the 4-second volume or the 4-second time. You see it's lower than 7 because if I'm taking the right out of the site, I really only have to look one direction. I'm going to have to deal with 1 minute of traffic. If I'm taking the left out of the site driveway for the 7 seconds, I have to look left. I have to look right. I have to find a gap with enough time for me to look left, look right, and then move into the lane. So I think that
yeah, no, it's helpful to have a
absolutely
background.
I mean, and just to clarify, 7.5 seconds is considered a reasonable amount of time to make that left and out of the site looking both ways.
Yeah, so you want a gap of 7.5 seconds in travel. So that means that there's a 7.5 second gap where there's no cars coming southbound and no cars going northbound, right? We don't want to say that there's a ton of gaps going southbound, but there's not enough gaps, say, in northbound, because we have to get over into those lanes when we're taking the left. And I will say just, a little bit of our favor, that the gaps provided in here from the highway capacity manual. This is an industry standard document. I will say that drivers in the Northeast, especially in the metropolitan area, they will accept shorter gaps, but we still stick to this data since that is the industry standard. What's the bird? I mean, I was in the office today where we were talking about like bad drivers. And like North Carolina, I'm from North Carolina, and North Carolina has awful drivers, but New Jersey has like good drivers. They're just like aggressive. That's what I thought last night. I have to defend my state a little bit, my new state.
Sorry, I looked at the times that we did the gap analysis this weekday, midday, Saturday, PM. There was another.
Sorry, it was so weekday midday, so the lunch period. Weekday evening to PM,
Oh,
so
okay.
it had like the dinner period, and then Saturday midday, so again the Saturday
Okay.
lunch. That coincides. The reason we didn't look at a Saturday PM is because typically volumes peak on Saturday during that midday period, like 2 p.m. 11.
Volumes on the, on 9 or volumes at the restaurant?
Volumes on 9,
Yeah.
but the reason, I mean, really, on 9, there's also probably a peak in the AM, but we don't look at that. We didn't look at that for this use because there's no breakfast component for this, so it was necessary. It's not going to open until 10 or 11 o'clock, right?
I think it's early,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's not set.
Yeah, it's not 7 to 9. It's the commuter peak hour that you might look at for an office use when you're doing that study.
Makes sense. Board questions, but and we can also even ask our consultant to come up and kind of give us summary. Yeah.
Good evening, Philip Greeley, Colliers Engineering and Design. Couple of things just relative to the traffic issues, and then we'll deal with the site plan issues. As they have gave a nice summary of information. I think and what you had one of your questions, how do the gaps vary? So midday, there are more gaps because the volume thought is 9 or 12. Okay. During the day. PM is probably the most critical time in terms of the number of gaps, and his data shows that. And he used the proper standards, and that's what the ASHTO standards and the highway capacity manual standards. So he did the proper analysis. And that's also the requirement of New York State DOT. Same with respect to site distances. So his submission, I think, is adequate and appropriate in terms of set comparison to standards. Traffic overall, I think, as Mr. Davis has indicated, they haven't got their responses from New York State. That's going to be critical. So, of course, they subject to. But one of the items that relates to the site plan and circulation is New York State DOT typically likes strict number of curb cuts and limits that curb cuts. I think what's been referred to as the preferred plan as the two-way driveway and then one-way driveway. That's going to be critical as part of DOT review because my experience on a corridor like this, that they may not approve a full-moving driveway and an exit drive, but that's their determination. I think the information is there for them to review. Gap analysis, trip generation, everything that we do is reasonable. It's just a question of how that other component comes. Relative to the site plan and alternate sketches that we'll prepare, I think, on a lot of these fast food operations, you have a one-way circulation. People are used to people backing out of spaces. Even with the preferred plan, which has a two-way drive aisle, you still have vehicles having to back out of their spaces. So you still have the same conflict point. You do lose under, I think it's scheme C and D, one more space. So that would require a variance. But parking, I think in general, we found more and more use of the drive-through. And I think the benefit of providing a bypass outweighs that one space. Again, that's you'd have to go to the ZBA, I guess, for that variance. In terms of the circulation and the grade issues, I think, the concern about the grade is one item, the 6 versus, I think, approximately 8% on the scenario that would require a variance, I guess, compared to the code. But the 6% versus 8%, the 8% can work. So you designed where that work. And the benefit of having the bypass lane, I think, outweighs that concern. That's, my review and my colleague was at the last meeting, Mr. Zillow, that's our field. Other item, I guess, relative to what was presented with the bypass lane, refuse pickup require a smaller vehicle, I guess, to pick that up. Trips, but I think benefits outweigh the concern relative to those items. A couple other alternates that were put in there. One doesn't work if it's guys drive aisle, the backup area is not wide enough. But again, I think that the bottom line here is that New York State is weighing heavily on this. Whatever people you have, change.
Yeah. So I mean, sorry. What I'm hearing from New York, and like two major issues that are kind of different. One is yes, DOT, but it oftentimes if we're conditionally approving a project based on DOT, it's without major concerns about what they may change. Ultimately, that's going to be if there were to be a conditional approval on this project, DOT changes it, they're going to have to come back plan on it, and that's on them. And I understood. The second piece, which I think I don't know if it was we hadn't seen the alternate studies before. Sounds like that there's, and maybe it'd be helpful to have a visual to show those up there, but that effectively it's a parking space versus a class 3 that and like the applicants.
Yeah, I think the applicant maybe can describe what they did in terms of each of those scenarios. They did go through the exercise of each one. That may be useful for the board to hear. And, they indicated what their concerns were with each particular plan. But some of those concerns are the same on the preferred plan. So I think it would be useful for the board to hear their rationale. And you have our comments.
And also board members, if you kind of have comments on this, because I think this kind of comes the crux of this review at this point, right? So
You also have our engineer.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, we want to hear from you guys on this point for sure.
He's remote.
Yeah, understood.
So I think in terms of just my summary up to this point, the traffic revisions that have been made and the additional information, we're satisfied with that. So the traffic volumes, gap analysis, sight lines, trip generation, queuing, all addressed. It's really down to what's the preferred site plan and the benefits and the negatives.
Right. That makes sense. I think, Maddie, one of the images that they put up was it was like a study of 5 or 6 or the total number of different circulation plans.
Hills.
Concepts of bypass.
I don't know, on your team, who's the appropriate,
Is
okay.
it Mason?
Sorry, Mason's up there, gotcha.
Mason, if you could turn your camera on and unmute and then just sort of walk us through, I'm gonna share screen.
Mason, if you could address, can you hear me?
Yep.
If you can address why we believe that the bypass won't work.
And then just, one of the comments that we just heard from our consultant was looking at the idea of trading a parking space, which would require a variance, but to allow for the bypass to occur. That. I don't know if you can walk us through those or directly address that specific question about parking spaces, losing a parking space to allow that to happen. I don't know if there's one of the studies of that list. If you want to point us to one of the drawing numbers that might be the best.
The CA 4D and 4C are very similar, so you can go to either one of those and keep it on the 4D. Of all of our concerns, the losing the parking stall was probably one of the more minor ones. We could, this concept only does lose the one parking stall, but the other issues that we brought up are bigger concerns. Regarding the space between that north property line, which is the right side of the page there, it would push the curb line almost to the property line there. And one of our main concerns with that is that the adjacent building is actually right on the property line there. And it really wouldn't offer any sort of buffer space with the cars backing out. And then we would need to put some sort of impact protection, which would cut into that 14-foot drive aisle even more and make it extremely narrow. We were concerned about that truck path you see on there. It's a larger truck. It's a Ford F-250, but it's running over the curb and it's almost hitting the building on the other side. It was in the comment letter. It was said that the truck could use that outer lane, but our concern with that would be there would really be nothing preventing them from using the inner lane, and then the consequence of that would be them running over curbs and possibly the building. And then we were concerned about the grading issues because we do have on our current site plan, we have a retaining wall on the side, and it really doesn't offer much space at all to incorporate that retaining wall, and the grade difference is pretty steep.
Sorry, because you noted there was a curb conflict, and I'm just trying to orient myself here, but that was on the south side or the left side of the drawing?
On the right side there, that curb line is right on that property line. It's very close, and the adjacent building is actually right on the property line. Like right where it says deficient number of stalls where that note is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how is that different from the current plan?
There's a buffer there on the current plan.
I don't think they don't have a current plan.
Yeah, it's a different drawing.
Yeah, it's not a.
Do you want to see that?
Yeah, I think it's fair to have that comparison. It looks like at the entrance, you are right up against the lot line, right?
So that's where there's actually a retaining wall on the adjacent parcel, but as you go west towards the top of the page, the building is right on that property line.
Yeah. So that's the portion up at on the western end of the lot that you were making the note of?
Yes.
I mean, I want to open this up for because I think we need to provide the applicant with feedback, which is, I think that they've got options that they're less comfortable with. And they're not presenting us as options; they're presenting us as studies that they had discarded. I want to be clear about that. That show a bypass, and looking at this just kind of practically, the idea of a bypass for a drive-through on Route 9 when it gets busy, it could be a real issue. Our consultant, has kind of highlighted it as an important issue. And we've talked about it here. I think that it sounds like everything else on the site has been, and with related to traffic at least, has been resolved. I just want to kind of get feedback if this is something that we want to ask the applicant to, look once more at giving us a site plan that allows for that protection, or if we're going to agree with them that based on their studies, it's not safe or feasible.
I guess I just have a question. So what we were looking at, I'm sorry, what we were just looking at right now was the applicant's preferred site plan with the two-way on the northern part of the site. If the bypass lane proposal is one way in and 2 lanes out, is that the difference between the 2 site plans? So it's 1 lane in that then splits into 2 lanes, the bypass plus the ordered lane or whatever you would call it. I think it's 1 exit out or 2 exits out with a bypass.
One exit.
I guess it narrows, it kind of, I think it'll take it to a single lane. Yeah.
1 lane out. And with the current, the applicant's proposal, there are how many parking spaces versus, and I'm not quite sure I understand why we would lose a parking space with the bypass lane.
Because when you angle the stalls, you lose a little bit of stall. You get less stalls for the same width. So it works out to being 1 less stall.
Right now, the parking is perpendicular to the building.
Yes.
On the submitted plan.
Right.
And in the alternate study, they had diagonal, those were diagonal.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so because of that, they lost a spot.
So it would go from, how many spots is that down to 1? That's
6 to 5.
having troubles.
There's a 7 to 6.
7 to 7.
7 to 6.
8 to 7.
Yeah, 8 to 7. Her plan is 8, and the one-way 7 1 goes down.
Okay.
I have a comment, I've looked at this a couple of times, and I appreciate you providing the other alternates for the site plan. But my thinking kind of goes back to, I don't know that it will be busy all the time. Clearly, there seems to be some indication that there will be demand here because we're coordinating with police for the opening, or that's a condition. My only thought, just, I don't want to like split hairs about the circulation, because I think whatever is a good plan that is safe for the customers makes sense. But I wonder if I was in that line and I got ill, let's say you're the 3rd car in and you're in the line. I mean, of course, like the ambulance can come and get you, but if someone wanted to get out of that line and go, they're really stuck. They're stuck. And I just think it creates an issue for the safety of your customers. And it should be considered about how people can move. I mean, even at banks, you see, they're not the busiest places that you can go, but they often have an ability to bypass around. So I just think that circulation, the safety of the people within the site, if anything happens, if a car were to catch on fire, I don't know. I'm not saying that any of those things are going to happen, but they are things that you should consider for people who are going to be there, parked and waiting for their food. They're just a thought. Worst case scenario.
No, but that's, that's why we're having this conversation, and it's, I don't know, that, I mean, so really, so and when we're looking at, um, comparing this plan to one of the, to one in which is a bypass, from a safety perspective, what do you see as the pros and the cons?
So I think the key is, and the applicant has laid out why each plan doesn't work or what the concerns are. But other than the grade, uh, I think the issues are really still the same. The backing out of a space, whether it's an angled space, the same issue. Their alternate plan shows a 14-foot wide drive aisle for angled spaces, and that's adequate even if you're up against the building. So I think the concern in terms of proximity and, that's not unusual. Okay. You're going to have a better safety scenario. Not only if a car breaks down and you're in the area where it's only single lane, that's where your backup would grow pretty quickly. So with the bypass lane, it allows people at certain times of the day, you may get an order that takes a little longer. Someone may say, you know what, I want to get off the lane and I want to leave. So from a safety standpoint, it accommodates bypass. Member identified for see allows that, and then it also gives people an option that they're not stuck. Uh, I think loss of one space in the whole scheme of things is not as critical. It does require a variance, but that is what it is. The 6 versus 8%, again, I think that can be worked from an engineering standpoint, and one is not less safe than the other if you design it properly for drainage and everything. So, my feeling right now, the arguments that are made, they're the same issues under either plan in terms of why they can't do it. The one-way circulation provides the best scenario from a safety standpoint and an operation standpoint, because the most successful drive-throughs have bypass lanes. No matter it's Popeyes or Chick-fil-A or whoever it is, they're designed with bypass. I don't think there's anything that I've heard thus far, that swayed my opinion. But I think it comes down to the loss of the space and the 6 versus 8%. Everything else fairly complicated.
Tony, I don't want to put you on the spot, but just like looking, you've spent a lot of time in this site plan in terms of potential impact of, are there other unforeseen complications? And I'll ask the applicant the same question.
Again, I just reiterate, DOT it's gonna be a big drive on this project, but if they're not gonna allow one, it's gonna be a whole, they're only allow one curb cut, it's gonna be a whole design anyway. In the sense is I understand to bring up the point, especially just hearing it now, a broken down car. You mess, your cars break down all the time. That is a really good point.
And I think I'm also thinking outside of the circulation, but in terms of, the setbacks that we're looking at and the buffers and the variances that have already been applied for, by altering, the circulation layout, you're kind of, impacting all of these other components that have been reviewed and discussed.
Correct. Now you go above the 6%, you go for variance. So it's another additional variance. And then a total redesign. And then next thing you know, DOT comes back, and again, we're only allowing one curb cut. Now you just redesign the whole project. So a lot hinges on that, the DOT approval as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would, and we've thrown a couple of ideas out there, so I don't know if Mason or
yeah. I'll let Mason address the grade comment. That's a little outside of my expertise. But I do know with the bypass lane, I don't disagree with Phil regarding those being prevalent at uses of this type. coffee houses, Starbucks, et cetera. But I do think that while not, we haven't studied Popeyes to see how often the bypass lane is used. I do know from doing various studies, the reason I bring up coffee houses like Starbucks is because those typically will have a bypass lane. We have studies, our firm has studied several of those in the area. And typically the bypass lanes are not used. They are not, so I forget the percentage, but it is a very low percentage of vehicles that enter the site actually use the bypass. Regarding, breakdowns or emergency, that happens, that does happen. I don't know if we have to necessarily design for those events that are what kind of unforeseen in a way. If a vehicle is in there and you are feeling ill, the typical driveway time or time in the drive-through is probably between 2 and 7 minutes, right? So by the time the cars in front of you have left, it may be between 4 and 10 minutes, 14 minutes that you are able to move out. So I'll just say that from like a circulation standpoint and from an actual use of the bypass lane standpoint. The other concern that I somewhat have with the bypass lane, the way I've seen them designed is that they're obviously it's helpful it's helpful when you're on a corner site, which we're not. You want the bypass lane to go to another frontage, because one thing we try to avoid, at least something I try to avoid whenever we design entrances, is to not have two exiting movements and an unsignalized approach. Because what ends up happening is sight line gets blocked by the person that's in the left lane, by the person that's in the right lane. So I'm on the right side, and I want to take a right out, and this person is beside me and I can't see past them. So with the bypass lane to really be efficient in this scenario, you do have to have two exit lanes. Introduce the opportunity for sight lines to be blocked that way. And the reason I say for the bypass lane to be effective is because if you only have one exit point for the bypass lane is really only effective until you've necked it down. And then it's no longer really a bypass lane. It's really just a storage for the moment. That's just Phil raises great points, but I do just want to add those in for your consideration.
I just have one quick question, because one of the things, I don't know if the board fully understands that if you do the bypass lane, it's almost like one way in and one way out, right? Where they're proposing now, you'll have 2 exits on either side, both the north and south side of the property.
Correct. That is correct.
We go back to the
Yeah.
plans. I think it was just 2 on one side.
That was,
That was it.
yeah.
It's an exit.
Yeah, the north driveway is going to full, so that people that have gone into the parking lot can exit.
Right.
So the north is full. The south is
Yeah,
still one way.
Right, the south is one way, so that's the other big difference between the 2 plans.
Can I ask you a question about the number of minutes you said the travel time was? Is that from the point of time ordering, the point of time getting to?
I think it's the point in time, my understanding is the point of time of entering the drive.
Okay.
So what it's been measured from is like once you entered into the lane.
Enter into the lane, 2 to 7 minutes to enter into the lane, place
Place
your
your
order.
order, pick up the order.
And I think there was I know we looked at the drawing last meeting, just that shows kind of like full capacity where the parking lot is fully loaded up. Is it this drawing, or do we have? So that's showing how many cars queued up. How many additional cars can queue up in addition to what's
I
showing?
think it's 11 cars currently is what's shown in that plan, if I recall, because I remember what we were concerned about based on our observation was that the max queue was 12 vehicles. So we knew that there was the opportunity for a 12 vehicle to be in the parking area. It wouldn't encroach into 9, but it would encroach into the parking area. So the thinking was to maybe make that 8th spot, that westerly spot, so screen up, possibly make it employee parking.
Right, we talked about that. And then in terms of the total number of vehicles that would be able to queue up on this site before it hits Route 9, realistically?
realistically, I don't remember that number. I'd have to like take the measurement and then, you'd say, and just kind of eyeball it. I don't want to eyeball it. I don't want to give you a bad number.
Right, and if there's any numbers from Popeye that would kind of give you based on this area, calculate demand and their anticipated, what they would anticipate a kind of a maximum, and we'll take opening out of the equation for the moment.
So so like say steady state.
Like your evening rush type.
Well, I mean, the counts that we did do were, based on a similar configure Popeyes, albeit it was in Half Moon, which is up towards Albany. It's not right smack in the middle of the metro area. The ones that there are Popeyes around, but they're the single order point configurations. Didn't know if that would provide valid data. So I guess we can see if Popeyes has more information maybe about the operations of it, if that's what you're asking. Because I'd say that like the trip data and the peak data, everything that we have from the traffic standpoint is based on observations of a Popeyes.
Right.
If I can just add one thing. Dr. Greeley talks about, going from 8 to 7, and he just talks about it as a variance. Popeyes is running a business, and the employees have to park, and you're taking a space away, you're taking a large percentage of spaces going from 8 to 7. So I don't really know how it's going to work out, but if somebody's driving by and they see all the spaces are taken, they're not going in. So taking a space away, well, it might just call it a variance, and you say, oh, I'm going to the zoning board, and the zoning board, will probably just grant it. I'm talking about, an operation of a business where you only have 8 spaces and, you have employees in business. So there's not all that many spaces to play with. And Mason, if you could address the issue about going from a grade of 6% to 9%, the impact on it.
Yeah, we're concerned mostly with that because we went back and forth with Keller Sessions pretty intensively with that, looking at the curve values and all that stuff, and we actually pushed the building farther back from our original site plan submission to get that value at an acceptable rate where it wouldn't be an issue, and we would have to bring it forward. I believe it was 6 feet, which would the 8% that was more of a like an estimate. The actual grade could be a little bit more than that. Yeah, that's also another thing that we wanted to note with this is the those concept plans were based on, they're from I believe 2022 when we were first starting out this project, and it was before we actually had the survey data, so they're based on aerial data, and the actual size of the site is actually a little bit smaller and a little bit narrower than what is shown in those concepts. So we need to update those concepts with the survey data to really get a good idea of how that would affect the drive aisles and the distances and setbacks. And
we feel as a board, and this I think kind of is where we have to move with this, and I want to kind of give the applicant kind of direction so we can kind of move forward. But effectively, the plan that's submitted, which has a parking area, compliant parking, the two-way drive on the north side of the lot, but does not have the bypass. So it has certain advantages over a potential other plan that let's be honest, I want to be clear, we haven't seen that other plan. We've seen studies versus asking the applicant to revise the plan to come up with a bypass that may still have deficiencies that that have been described, i.e. is still that one way out. I do think it's important. It's, you're kind of stuck with the width of the lot there, kind of which is better, and which as a board we see them moving it, kind of developing or finalizing the plan that's been submitted to us, which is or asking for this bypass, which could change or may not be feasible. But I think that's something we need to be clear about. And I would like to hear folks.
Well, I guess I want to go back, to Tony's comment about DOT, because I guess I really wonder what, regardless, I wouldn't mind seeing a bypass plan and to be able to really compare, whatever their ideal plan is with the best they could possibly come up with a bypass plan, but to actually ask them to do that if DOT is going to come back with something else that would actually require other site plan, modifications. I'm just not sure. And it seems, we're sort of a little bit stuck because I don't think I would feel comfortable approving the site plan conditional on whatever DOT's comments are. But then how long will we be waiting for DOT's comments? So I feel a little stuck here, quite frankly. Not sure.
Yeah.
My comments are, in the interest of the applicant, and I don't want this application to have to drag on for longer than is necessary, because I realize that it's for everybody and resources. But if it is hinging upon what the DOT is going to their comments, and they really are going to be the ultimate deciding factor, yeah, I do feel like we really need that. I don't want to create additional work. I guess it's like my point is that I don't want to spin your wheels. So whatever, or what is the most efficient course of action in terms, because I think you answered all of our questions, responded to our concerns, and presented alternatives. And I think it's a challenging site. And I think definitely done your part responding to our concerns. So that's where I would leave it.
Any other thoughts?
I have a couple of questions. Does either plan require 2 curb cuts? Or was one?
They both require 2 curb cuts, yes.
So is that the information you would be waiting for from DOT, whether they would allow 2 curb cuts?
That's part of what you're waiting for, but more important is whether DOT would allow a full open curb cut. Because right now, the alternate plan, the one-way plan, is one-way entry, one-way exit. So even though it's 2 curb cuts, it's only 2. The preferred plan has 3 plus movements because it's 2-way driveway and a
All right, so I don't want to leave the applicant in a total, arch here. I want to give, some direction. I guess the question is if DOT is acceptance of the plan as it's submitted, what's being called the preferred plan without the bypass, is this something that we feel as a board is acceptable, or do we feel like we can't make that approval without seeing a fully developed bypass plan? To me, that's the question. And it's either we ask for it or we kind of understand that what's been presented is acceptable. And I think we need to just land one side of that or the other.
As much as I would like to see the bypass plan, I think if DOT approved the existing plan, I could live with it.
I would agree.
I mean, I have a comfort, having seen everything on this, I have a comfort level with that as well. So, I mean, I think that, while a lot rides on where DOT lands on this, I think that where we are, well and perfect, I think is developed and maybe the lesser of the various problems.
So now I just want
to. Thanks, Valerie.
No, but so if they go to the ZBA and the ZBA grants them the sign variances, would this board be comfortable with moving forward with the current plan with contingent, like a condition of, DOT approval?
Right. I mean, I think at that point, tell me if I'm wrong, it becomes that's at the applicant's risk, because if DOT comes back and says you can't do that, then they would have to come back to this board for a revised site plan.
Okay, that's really what I was saying.
Okay. Okay. All right, we said so much. So, well, just procedurally, can I have a motion to open up a public hearing
Motion to open the public hearing.
or real public hearing? I should say.
Michael Aronson, second.
Sorry, any objections? No objections. Is there anybody here tonight to speak to this application? Don't see anybody here. If there's anybody on Zoom,
Not a single.
I don't see a single person on Zoom to raise their hand. Tumbleweeds. We got them with the traffic talk.
No offense, Mason.
Okay, very good. So, motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Yeah, Eric's not going to make the motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Carly, second the motion.
Any objections? Objections that carried. You guys have the bargaining where I think we understand and we all have. Yeah, no, please.
Very, very good. So this, regardless of which plan gets approved,
Yes.
grand opening plan, traffic management, on these USRs, quick serve restaurants have a grand opening phase, and some last weeks, some last a couple of weeks, where you get that initial reaction, and you'll see you well past 11 or 12. That is the typical. Right? That's critical for the plan, which you don't want backups on the time. Number two, just to clarify a couple items, Skip's comments. So with the bypass plan, when you get to the bypass plan, allows the bypass up past where the pickup window is. Out of Route 9, we don't, and DOT do not approve anymore, side by side 2-lane exits. So under the plan, or at least the concept plan, it showed it returning to a single lane at the Route 9 intersection. I think relative to Mr. Davis' comments about the one parking space, we understand parking is critical. Each QSR is a little different, but I'm sure Popeyes could provide some data that would show drive-through versus parking customers. They have the information, I'm sure. And that, you know, if DOT approves the plan the way it is, so be it. But if they do come back, that's something that the applicant needs to investigate at that point. And relative to the comments I heard from Mason was that the alternate plans are just sketches. That could change our comments because we don't have enough room for a 14-foot drive aisle, and that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So just ends with that.
That's also all very helpful. And I think as far as that information, I think we could have that for us at our next meeting regarding the drive-through versus parking and those numbers. That'd be very helpful. And I would suppose if there's any way to overlay what you already have on one of those kind of two feasible studies, just to show that if the site really is much smaller than what it was, it would be just good to know that, especially if we wind up coming back after DOT reviews the project or revised site plan. Thank you. All right, thank you. Okay. Motion to adjourn the item.
If you could just explain, so my consultant understands. Yes. What you're referring to when you talk about the overlay, you mean the preferred plan versus an alternative?
So we heard a comment, I think from Mason that those studies were not to scale. So if
you want to compare apples to apples,
they were done before the survey was there. So if the survey shows that the site is a foot narrower, then that's critical because you may not be able to get the proper drive.
It may be entirely moving.
Schedule factor.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that you need to do all of them. We look at, I think the 4C, 4D as being equivalent to a 4C would be fine. Just one of those, just to show that, illustrate that for us. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, guys. So motion support to adjourn the item.
Carly, a motion to adjourn this item.
Eric Salvador, second.
Any objections? Object carried. All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving right along. Item 9, Groton Avenue, Planning Board, 1023 to 823. Right, so this is. Again, we have. Yeah. All right, so JB will come up, I think before you start, my other notes. Uh, okay, so maybe can we have Valerie, if you can give us your update of changes.
All right, so I think, the status of this project is that this applicant is looking to apply the Croton Avenue overlay district on this project. A lot of the comments that we've had and just in terms of, so I think and I'll defer to Tony to highlight his, but in terms of actually moving this project forward in any stretch of the means, it's going to need variances from the ZBA, which would mean a recommendation from this board. And a number of items we have raised concerns with is actually this particular project really applying for the Croton Avenue Overlay District and whether the intent of the Croton Avenue Overlay District really meets this particular project. Not only in terms of some of the variances that are required, but specifically dealing with the architectural elements, the landscaping elements, as well as some of the overall site access issues. And so those are items that are still outstanding that the applicant hasn't specifically really looked at the architectural review and the landscaping and those requirements and actually noting how their particular project actually is applicable to those guidelines. And we've been asking that for a number of reviews now at this point. And I think that's important because ultimately there is an overall intent for the overlay district, and that district is to basically, part of it is it's like form-based code, so part of it is to create a visual and pedestrian experience. And, and right now it seems like they're asking for this particular overlay because they want an all residential building.
Tony?
So our issues stay the same regarding the use of the neighbor's property and easement agreements. The new plan you just provided does show some traffic movements backing out of the garage and they're backing onto your neighbor's property.
Can we actually get the site plan out? I think that'd be-
Next. Yeah, right there. So right there, you're using the neighbor's property to use your movements. It's going to be, you have to be easement agreements for all of that. Be using the property, especially like we discussed in the past. Drivers getting used to come into the site as one-way circulation around. So these are things that are gonna have to get addressed. And that does appear a little bit tight. Even like you think about, you showed that the movements of these cars, but are you going to be able to get space in between the two buildings into that first spot? You might want to show that movement. So you're coming in into that spot. That might be a little tight. You might want to look at that as well.
And can we zoom out on this plan? So the property line, right, is, I mean, it'd be nice to have that like bright red, right, on this line, because the entire circulation plan is dependent upon another property, right?
Correct. Yeah, all the movements too. You can try to get out of their garage. They're gonna have to back onto that neighbor's property.
Right. So I think that you've been saying this. This has been in Tony's memos from day one. How are we supposed to evaluate a site plan where half of what needs to happen is not on the site? Right.
Well,
Yeah.
so,
That's my own.
yeah. Leave the easement for left, but,
Okay.
and when I look at the form-based code, my interpretation of the form-based code, and I read through it, I think that very much what we have here is what we're trying to do. If you look at the at the properties surrounding the area. If you're looking at the neighborhood and the build type of buildings, if you go through the list of items, we're trying to keep a building that's consistent with it, consistent with the neighborhood historical aspects. These are three buildings together. To me, they're races of architectural here in this area. You have Seatown, you have all sorts of modern looking buildings. You have three properties that are setback, they have a lawn area, they have grass area, and they all are they've been there stuff that they are very architectural. But the form is was talking about is keeping in the architectural guidelines, is keeping the architectural of the past in here. Now what we added is we added a portico, we added a porch that enhances that. It matches the adjacent building. When it talks about landscaping, it talks about buffer, it talks about buffering the landscape, the parking area. That is before and after. Architectural, I don't think, like we're not proposing drastic changes to architecture. And when you look about landscaping guidelines, we are showing landscaping in the front. We are showing shrub, like there's two delineation for the form-based code. We are showing sit in the back, we're showing the buffer with landscaping as well. And then getting back to the maneuver and the layout. At one point, we did provide the board with a alternative plan that showed that we didn't need the adjacent neighborhood, and it's been repeated to us that we need to show or have an easement. And that's, at one point, the two neighbors spoke, and that's what more about it. So then, if we are being told that this is something that's been used for the last 100 years, that the two houses have shared driveway, but now we're saying that either they're going to share a driveway or through an easement, or they cannot share a driveway at all. And that's the maneuvering that is with this property. Right now, if you look at an aerial view, what we're proposing is that improvement to the internet. We are actually having a larger maneuvering area in the back for the vehicles going across. Again, when you go to 270, I'm sure you all read the memo provided. I mean, know that this maintains the walking distance. There is shops and stores. I mean, I think that's a great picture. In a green area in front of the building, we enlarging the sidewalk in front of the building to match the adjacent sidewalk. All of those right we have.
Yeah, I mean, Valerie, it might be helpful to get more guidance from you in terms of how ultimately kind of we look at the overlay district. I mean, I think that
I think the overlay district was meant to be new build.
Right.
Right. And not necessarily take the existing buildings and just pull out pieces that, work and say that that's how and apply the overlay. I think that's the biggest challenge here, is really meant for new construction.
Can I ask a question? I know there was a project that we were looking at on ProNav earlier.
31.
That was a similar project we were trying, that was proposing a similar thing to be pumped into the overlay district. And I believe they were adding additional.
We added to the rear, and we treated that it was the inception of the form-based code, and we had BFJ as a consultant. But at the time, they said that they're the ones working on the form-based code, and they said that was.
It was the typology of that particular building and its placement on the sidewalk as well. Right. It was contextual. It wasn't just the fact that they were like, okay, well, this one again. I do think when I think of the form-based code and the overlay districts, I think of an understanding is like you're pulling a permit and you're doing significant work that's going to either completely alter the building that's there or significantly alter the building that's there. You think of the form-based code as working, is when there was the 138 40 going with the senior living residents and how they were, creating, getting the additional density bonus by creating some pedestrian amenities where other people can go pocket park. That is kind of things where it's public access, it's amenities. I mean, are people going to enter into these yards and use these yards and sit in these yards? I mean,
Well, we are, but
because that's not really a public amenity.
going back to that, like this, is something, 31 Vernon, that building, in addition to the back, there was no changes except some aesthetic touching with the brick and the front. It is a different setting, but it was the purpose of that was to maintain what it was in the neighborhood. And again, I think in the here we're doing the same thing. I mean, in the form-based code, I mean, it is great to apply it as a new, but there is not many, very few places in downtown and around where it's an empty lot that you can say, okay, let's take that.
That may require, in some cases, form-based zoning requires raising a building. I'm not suggesting that's happening. I guess I would disagree that this is the same thing. That's
I guess I have a question. So this is the NC2 district. The form-based code is the only option?
No, they could do the NC too.
Yeah, so
Zoning.
that's,
Okay.
what is that? I don't know what the pros and cons are in your, but why not do that?
If we apply the NC2, then it means I can bring a building up to the sidewalk, very close to the sidewalk. It can occupy most of the property, will take down a historical building. And that it's been there for 100 years. It will be eliminating the lawn, and it will be breaking the unit that you have between those three
But do you
buildings.
have to do that under the NC2 or not?
No,
No, but you should have the whole.
Well, it's the same thing here though, under the downtown. I mean, I think the issue is that there are very specific things that this board needs to look at in the downtown overlay. Like it specifically says, like for architectural guidelines, the planning board shall consider the following architectural guidelines during its review process for
Right.
building site walls and parking structures. And it starts off with horizontal building modulation, building facade should conform to the following standards, and has very specific things. And then it goes through modulated roof line and building articulation, vertical articulation, materials, fenestration, and blank walls and roofs. So I think that's just my point, is that there's very specific things that the board needs to ultimately say that, yes, this overlay, this particular project meets these overlay criteria.
But if you go through the first criteria, like you said in the memo, we are consistent with the historical village pattern. It enhances the pedestrian general large in the sidewalk. I mean, the whole list of items, I think that does apply.
is that matrix in the set and
It's not, it's actually in, my memo refers to the specific sections, but it's specifically, 270.15.1, I think it's H. And then
H2,
H2 and
H3.
H3.
And we have, I mean, have you provided just a matrix, that says, this is how we're complying with each one of these?
Well, I can provide something writing, but it is landscaping, there is landscape at the rear. It talks about creating about, so you don't see the parking from the street. There is landscaping in the front. I mean, the only thing that it talks about one large tree every 40 feet, 38 feet, so we may be able to put a large tree in the front lawn. Again, it goes, to me, it goes back to the form-based code that we're applying the overlay, and you have a lot that is been there. And so what is the whole sense of if you're planning to take down properties and not maintaining?
I think the incentive is to increase density. I think that's what the form-based code is for.
Okay, so again, so we're taking our way of increasing density is taking one spot at the bottom of the building that is commercial, that and converted that to residential, which both properties on each side are all residential. So you have three properties that will be all residential in the middle for now. And the Oldbury is similar in that.
Which you could do through a zoning variance.
Right, but I think the whole idea was so when the form-based code was put in, so we don't have this the new bit expression before.
I don't think that the form-based code exists to allow the zoning board to provide variances instead of the.
But we never really.
And I think the other thing too is there are a tremendous amount of zoning variances that they do need for this form-based code on top of that, right? So that, I mean, so we're raising some of these issues of whether like you're actually going to be able to, you know, acknowledge that, you know, this plan meets these certain architectural and landscape guidelines. But in addition, there's a lot of variances just to meet the building form that's proposed under the overlay.
Can I ask a specific question? The purpose of this application is so that you can create three bedroom units.
Yeah.
And the other avenues for doing that would be potentially through the variance for the conditional use at the flag damage.
Yes.
So, and it would not require actually going through the form-based code. So if it's not going to actually infer any benefits on you, it's going to be overpaid the variances. So it's like that 5,000 cuts. How is it really beneficial in the fact that you don't actually have enough driveway to create a site plan? It seems like you're trying to make it into something that it just can't be in its current form.
Well, if we go to 27051A, 8(1) through 8, and 10, I think that all those items, you know, consistent with the historical pattern, is that it has the bedroom sidewalk. It's like, again, you have a property that's 38 feet. Most of the properties in the area are small, unless we take C-Town across the street, a property that would be only, I guess my issue with what I'm trying to explain is that you take these overlays, we put your blanket over the district, and then with only one property is affected.
You don't have to opt into it. That's an option.
Right, but that's right.
It's still
Because when I read the first 8 items, and it seemed to me that they're clients, but
there's, I mean, two things. I think that just conceptually, you know, the overlay, I don't think was put in place to just take all the existing buildings that are already more or less in compliance. So some can certainly not all of those. The form-based codes requirements and say, all right, now you can just kind of apply it, right? But that's one. The second piece is, you know, there are so many variants beyond what's already there. At what point is it not really form-based? Does it not apply? And you're just kind of like forcing, you know, whatever, round pegs in a hole, and it's just not fitting. And we're saying this at the point where we've been reviewing this for several months. We've been, you know, reiterating these comments. Valerie has had these comments in her reviews to you guys, you know, from day one. And I think we're kind of at a crux point here where, you know, if it doesn't fit, what's another way of achieving what you're trying to achieve? You know, we're not saying you can't do this. It's just that this may not be the right approach. And if you are adamant that it is, we need a much clearer response from you in terms of, and maybe that just doesn't exist, but you know, how this actually works, because we haven't seen it after I don't know how many months it's been up the agenda.
well, again, to say that this is only applicable to new buildings and construction, that wasn't specific, and it's been used already in a building. I took it for an and I'm trying to, when I looked at the two projects together, I see a lot of similarities in about 21 Front Avenue. And as we put an addition in the rear, we maintain the front. There's an open space, there's a public area that we are maintaining. And again, it's maintaining the historical aspects of the architectural guidelines. So that's what I'm having a little bit of.
But I do think that Chair Roy's comments were very I think they're very good. I think it's just, and I think that's, the way I agree, I completely feel that way too. It's like, if you're gonna make the case, make the case. Otherwise, let's find a different way to do this. Because you're gonna achieve your goal, right? And if there's two possible ways to do it, and one fits the intent better. But otherwise, make your case, and the case hasn't been made, I think.
So the board's agreement that will send an amendment does not, you know. Okay.
And I guess I'm sorry to keep harping on this, but I guess I don't quite understand. Why wouldn't you want to just do a conditional use variance under the NC2? The thing that you're getting out of this that you can't get out of other.
Well, it's totally different, you know, now you're going to different boards, different variants, a use variance, and an area variance. There's a lot of things that come into play.
I'm sorry, I'm just.
No, it's
make sure.
There's a big difference between obtaining the use variance.
I think the difference is that you can't have residential on the first floor.
Right.
And I think it's good. But that would be technically a use
That would be a use
Yeah.
variance.
Right.
And there's a much higher threshold.
Right, because they would have to prove that no other use that's committed on that first floor would be of any economic value.
Right.
Or would not be economically viable in that.
Okay, and I do want to point out, I do think the adjacent property does still have ground floor commercial. The one when you're facing the property on the right, not the multi-story, but the property on the right has some kind of office, the red building. Yeah, it has some kind of office on the main floor.
Okay, so I thought it was for residential.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think, you know, we need a clearer argument as to how this fits. I mean, I think the architectural guidelines are a big part of it. But if we're required to ask the CBA for a laundry list of variances from the form-based code because of the way that this is presented, I mean, it just seems like that. How is that appropriate then for us to review this under the form-based code and grant the effectively, right? I mean, and I realize you probably take issue with my wording, but effectively granting a kind of a form of a use variance.
Well, right, but going back to what you were asking for, under the form-based code, that you have the discretion to modify these values. So it's not that it won't get better.
I mean, there are certain criteria I know that we can modify, or that we have the ability to, but we don't, you know, I think one of the things that we're saying right here is once that list gets so big, you know, why are we granting those modifications? And we also can ask the ZBA to review them as well. Tell me if I'm wrong on that point.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
And it sounds like from what I'm hearing from the board, it might be helpful for you to submit in your next written submission, just a commentary as to how your proposed plan specifically meets the criteria and the intent of the overlay. I think that would go a long way to help the board in moving forward with your project.
And I think that actually taking the code of the overlay and saying this project meets this by, you know, because I think what you've been providing is just the first 8 bullets of the purpose of the overlay and not necessarily the actual.
I think that we've gone through it. I mean, there's a lot of things we describe, but okay.
Like a tabular analysis, you know, just the 30 things that need to happen, and this is how it's achieved. And then we should probably just take a moment then also on the driveway side of it as well, came up, because that's also a significant
Well, this, right, just because the employer.
Yeah.
I can't say.
Good evening, Robert Sportsman for the applicant. I was there to comment on this, to look at it recently. And what struck me was that there was something that would affect 101. That 101, the neighboring spot, I believe is 101, 99, 101.
Yeah.
So, an easement regarding your property. 101's not before the board. And we don't grant, as a property owner, we don't grant, we can't do that, and 101 is not asked for it. And from what I understand, the parties have had conversations and they're not interested in an easement of any nature. So I go to the next aspect of 101's not before you, so it's hard to make determinations as to them. Does the board have the authority to require a property owner to grant an easement over their property to another property for any purpose?
I don't believe so.
I don't either. But you did on another property I was involved with, the 19 Camp-Woods. You need that requirement. On this property, again, I think it's beyond. It's my opinion, I've done a lot of research on it, counsel, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this. That would be an unlawful taking. He's not getting anything and they're required to give something. Okay, so that is a real serious issue. And I think it's beyond the scope of the authority of the board to require that. So I think that issue, it affects the driveway matter. The other aspect of it is, I don't know, I wasn't involved in the beginning of this at all. I don't know who designed the circular drive. 99 has a driveway, and a driveway adequate to get into their property and exit their property. They have that. No question about that. Why do they need another? If that's what they choose, that's their property, that's how they want to get in and out of their property, why do they have to do anything else? So that's a serious question. I can just imagine someone knocking on my door and saying, well, excuse me, you have to get an easement to do something on your property in order to get in and out. It just doesn't make sense to me. So that as the easement, I get like if we were sitting around with, I'm not a form-based code expert in no way, but I was a big planner. I'd say, this is the way things should be. I'm doing Disneyland. You should be able to do this and do that and do this. But that's not what we have. We have a very dense downtown. I went there today. I didn't see a business next to it. I looked, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, maybe it's no longer.
Yeah, and I know Frank Costello for the longest time. That was his office.
Right.
And the owners of the property are Austin residents. Their kids went through the school system, like my kids still yes. And they bought a property as an investment. I know as an attorney doing a lot of real estate and advising people and being involved, offices downtown in our little town and others, they're not in high demand. I don't know if I make the variance requirement, but I do know several things about Austin. One is that they need housing. It's a real need. And this project provides some additional housing. What does it disrupt? I can't see what it disrupts. I look at the buildings, I see three actually nice residential buildings on that street that has a little bit of a hodgepodge of stuff. We have, hookah bar, or whatever you call it. We've got a lot of bars, we got nail polish places. But here we have what do you call it? You're from up there, you're younger than me.
I said it better not be a hookah.
What is
bar.
that? Down there on Perkin Avenue.
Smoke shop.
Yeah, there you go. And see, I'm aging myself. And I see 3 houses that are nice, well maintained. These people can't maintain it. The neighbors maintain it. I said, what the heck's the problem with this? And the driveway, the guy, it's not his driveway. What are we talking about here? The man has a driveway. They've used it for 100 years. What are we doing? Tell me you can't use the driveway.
So I just want to step in on that because we're not telling anybody they need to go get an easement or the neighbor needs to do something that they don't want to do. We're evaluating a site plan and we're seeing on the site plan that that part of what makes that site plan work is something on somebody else's property. That can't work. If you want to proceed with the site plan as it's been presented to us, then that would require an easement because we can't allow a site plan that only works with the other neighbors, property being part of it, right? So we're not asking for anything on the neighbors. You guys are because it's shown on your plans. That's all.
I mean, I'm not
period.
I'm sorry. Let me just. I lose my thought. I'm not a traffic expert. I spend a lot of my time in the city, and I always get a little mixed up when I talk about
you're talking about arsoning and something up here, and I'm talking about parking and how much is needed. I think we get a little special at times. They've been parking there, they've been getting back and forth, they've been using it for a lot of time. People seem to be able to do that. And I do believe that no matter what they do there, I don't know how busy Frank was in his office, how many people came and how many people parked back there. But there's no record that I've been made aware of where people couldn't get in and out of the building, crashed or ran over anything. They went in there, they parked, they got in and out. That's what we do in life, right? So getting into the Disney World stuff is beyond me. We have a property that's there that works, it looks good, they want to keep it looking nice, and they want to provide housing in the village. So whether it's form-based or variance, or whatever, I'm gonna leave that up to JD. That's his bailiwick. But I'm wondering why this requirement of the driveway is coming up. I get it, but I don't think you can. I don't think you have the authority.
I don't think this site plan works.
Yeah, because
That involves crossing onto
You're
the
asking
property
for
without
approval.
marketing authority.
And I just want to add, your neighbor decides, you want to know what? I'm sick of this. I'm gonna put up a wall. They're not using this anymore. Now you have to get 5, 6 cars in and out of a driveway. That's probably, I think it's like, what, 9 feet?
But there's the other driveway. But I'm saying you don't need to say.
There won't be another driveway because your neighbor decides to close that off.
He closes his driveway.
You have
There is
your-
a driveway that belongs to 99.
Yeah, but you're trying to get, I think it's what, 5, 6 cars.
They do now.
And with all these, well, now you have increased, people.
Do that?
You're adding apartments.
So it sounds like you'll have to provide a site plan that only contains everything on your property,
We did,
and it didn't work.
when we presented this, we went back to the workers felt strong that we need the easement. But we can go back to.
Yeah, I don't know how far off you're saying the parking is in the back. You know, if it's, you know, I frequently see compact cars only required in some places because there's not enough space. What are we saying there? I mean, this space is gonna.
I was waiting for someone to tell me what.
Yeah, sorry, it's like.
Okay.
Don't show what they show.
Sorry.
And I don't know how much we need to parse this. I think it's really straightforward, which is that we're being presented with a site plan. This is literally a site plan review.
Yeah, there you go.
And so it either works on their lot
There you go.
or it doesn't, and it's.
So if you don't have that access, if that's closed off and you're not using that anymore, how are these cars all gonna move around and leave and?
I think that there was a plan, and forgot if I was remember, back in, we talked about it, where we showed that if we put a fence on the property line, that we're able to fit our car back, because it will change the way we park.
Yeah, I think if, all we're asking for is this easement exists, then provide it to us. Because otherwise, how can we evaluate the site?
You're saying that if they're not gonna be able to do the easement,
Yeah.
that the site plan would have to show the sole use of one driveway.
That's exactly what the board is
One
saying.
property, it's not just the driveway right now. Yeah. This is what we've been saying all along. Yeah.
But you have to do that analysis showing cars parked in every space and cars trying to navigate in and out. When somebody's coming in, it's trying to get out.
And I think, I think people on this board have been very clear. We definitely are in favor of the housing. But as the chair said earlier, sort of asking us to put a square peg in for hole. We're just asking for you to show us how you can comply with things so we can approve the site. It's sort of where we stand.
Okay.
If I can take this down.
I think, just to clarify, there's no way, the board can't require our client to give a variance to anyone else.
I think the board doesn't require, what the board asks is when there's a situation like that, is if you're going to proceed with that site plan, then you need to demonstrate that you have access to the neighboring property, because the property is giving permission, the other property.
If 99 needs it,
Yes,
if 99 doesn't need it, we don't have to get involved with that easement.
that's correct, but then you have to prove to the board, just as they were saying, everything else you'll need to full access.
Okay. We can continue to do.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I actually will just, is there kind of a motion to reopen the public hearing on this application?
Public hearing. Angelica Kiwanis.
Hey,
Any objection? No objections, motion carries. We're in a public hearing. I don't see any attendees right now, and the room is empty. So I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing on that application.
Adjourn the public hearing.
Eric Talbot, I second.
Any objections? No objections, carries. Can I have a motion to adjourn the agenda item?
Right, motion to adjourn the.
Michael Erickson, second.
Any objections? No objections, carries. All right. We are now to 196 North Highland. So maybe you guys can channel.
Like it's
We're all sitting here. That's like easy. Okay, yeah. So that, well, yeah, I think that this will be, let's kind of have this conversation. So,
Unban some of the engineering.
right. And it sounds like, and, right. So since we last saw you on this, it sounds like the site engineering is really where things have moved. Maybe Tony, you can give us the update there.
Yeah, so I just kind of want to speak a little bit on your stormwater treatment and the issues I think you're going to have. And I think we had requested in our memo too, you might want to look at possible other alternatives. Because when you think about the site, it's underground mitigation you're going to be using. Picture that's about 3-4 feet deep into the soil. If you're cutting that site 14 feet, 15 feet. So now your system's going to be technically 20, almost 20 feet below that ground.
There's no way to test, right? There's no way.
You have to test where your system's going to be.
Right, I think that's to be this.
Well, they canceled the test on us. We had that scheduled, but I think they weren't ready and they tried to reschedule in the afternoon, but we weren't even available in the afternoon. So it wasn't. But from the photos I think I saw, it didn't look like that was a 20-foot hole. And we did see a bit of water in the hole too, so that might be a concern too, because the regulation is there can be no rock or water 3 feet below the system. Now you're digging 20 feet into the ground and the system's going to be that deep. So that's something you might want to
we'll
keep in mind and look at alternative options. Even, I don't know if you want to get permission from the town, from the building department to maybe do a test on your own. But that I see as a big issue.
I know that there was communication there.
Yeah, they did that. We had it scheduled in the morning. Our guy was on the way there and they called and said, no, we're having an issue. So we can't do the test now. Can you come back in the afternoon?
They did take them home because they had a call from thinking that somebody was doing work with call. Like, no, it's
And then, yeah, there's some other.
So the stormwater, the other big thing is going to be the DOT determination. I don't know if you heard anything back on that.
No.
Another thing I want to note is you do have the servicing, rerouting the service to 25 seater. That's correct. And it still seems like you're tying those two sewers in on the site and coming out with one pipe. If you're doing that, that requires health department approval because now you're making that stub a public main. So you should show two separate services connecting to the main in the street. Okay. Just be aware of that. I noted it and it stayed on the plan, so I didn't know if that's what your intent was to create a stub. I don't think you'd want to go that route, but those services have to be separate. The other thing I want to note about that service in 25 seater lane, when I'm looking at your structural plans, you're running that service completely under the footing of the designed walls. You're going to want to shift that out of the way because I don't think you want that service. If anything ever happens, you're going to dig up the wall footing back to it.
Right, I know there was a conversation internally about this is going to be at 50 feet, the location.
Yeah, where you're going to need that. You might need to shift that. I mean, your structural engineer did rectify the issue of the footings, and we're in the process of possibly getting a review from our consultant structural engineer on those walls. Again, you show the easements, but we're going to need easement agreements once you have that all wrapped up for that sewer easement. And And I think those are the big points. The other one's a little, you're looking at drainage, it looks like you're still pushing towards the curb line. And then I think the issue was getting water trapped against the curbs, and now you're proposing impervious pavement, I think. But you didn't really have a cutoff where you're doing that pavement. It just kind of points into the corner. But you need calculations for all that. Make sure the soil is permeable enough to actually handle that. So we're gonna need all stormwater calculations, all that as well. And those are the big things. I won't, bore you with all the other little civil engineering items, but those were the big points.
Right, again, we understand that the level around all that, which was wanted to bring the more up to date as some of the stuff in here addressed.
Yeah.
Sure. Can we put and have the drawings, I guess, just the elevations up? I think that the engineering questions are probably the biggest outstanding site plan issues. But we've also had a lengthy BAR conversation. It doesn't look like anything changed after our conversation last time, where we kind of talked about reorienting the ground versus the building. So is that still in progress? You haven't seen that yet? Okay. All right, well, that's good. Then we won't rehash any of that. And then, I mean, the other comment, which we've been talking about from day one, is just looking at this district and I think this continues to be highlighted in Valerie's letters, but it's also been in all of, it's been in our meeting notes, I think, from the time we first talked about this project, is just looking at the ratio of commercial space. And that whole area in the back that's being referred to as storage, it's right off the parking lot. That could very well be additional, potentially commercial space. And just looking at that, understanding that, and addressing that comment, because that's been open from day one, and it's a big one. It hasn't changed. Board members, other comments? I will, can I have a motion to open up a public hearing, reopen the public hearing?
Maria, motion to open the public hearing.
Eric Talbot, I second.
Any objections? No objections for the public hearing. Anybody here to speak to this application? Nobody is. There's nobody on Zoom. Can I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
Maria, motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Michael Aronson, second.
Any objections? No objections. That motion carries. Are Valerie, Tony, Darren, are we good on this application tonight? Okay. Motion to adjourn the application.
Eric Talbot, I make the motion to adjourn the application.
Carly, second the motion.
Any objections? No objections. That carries. You're good. You can go sit down for now. Thanks. Okay, so we're good. Are there any updates or on the rest of the agenda that we need to critically talk about tonight?
No, none of them. All of them were still either they've been recently before the boards or they're pending like testing. The only one is Riverwalk, but we're working with them to do some additional testing and some additional investigations on their site. Hoping to get them back before the board soon. If not, that's one project we can talk about at some point, whether we consider removing them.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, everybody. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Michael Aronson, motion to adjourn the meeting.
Carly, second the motion.
Any objections? Motion carries. Thank you, guys.
Good night, Joe. Good night, Jamie.
Good night.